Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royce. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. As is apparent from any interior design magazine, indoor plants are a big part of design, regardless of the style, color, or spaces. Leafy green plants add life to an interior space. Fresh cut flowers are also great to add colors to a room, but they are short-lived and generally last about a week. Leafy green plants can last for months and years after years, and a person does not need a green thumb to own an indoor plant. Leafy has experts that can guide you to plants that can purify the air, survive in low lights, and be pet-friendly. I am excited to have Nick Jones, who is a plant consultant of Leafy and will share more about indoor plants with us. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Daphne. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Tell us about yourself and what you do.
So I work for Leafy. We are theleafyplant.com. We're also on Instagram. We have 4 stores throughout California. I'm in our Palo Alto location. This is where we started it all. I believe this store opened Thanksgiving of 2018. I've been with the company since 2019. I've seen a lot of crazy changes through pandemic and just through market changes. People kind of, during the lockdown, they spent a lot more time at home. So we had a lot more interest in plant growth and we've just extended that. I love working for Leafy. There's a lot that I've learned being here, a lot of great people that I've met, and we are just open to helping people bring the outside into their lives. And yeah, we're ready to help you find that plant that will really like brighten up your space or kind of tie together something.
You have a lot of plants behind you. Are they from California or from different part of the world?
For the most part, everything I have in the store, it comes from a tropical or subtropical space. There's not many plants in here that I would say come from California. We maybe have some succulents that come from California or Mexico, but for the most part, they come from Southeast Asia, Brazilian rainforest, South Africa. Most of the plants that we have here in the shop, they kind of require specific humidity, low to medium bright light. I don't really have anything that could survive outdoors. So what we kind of focus on is the indoor space. If you were here in the shop, you would kind of palpably feel the humidity. We constantly try to foster a more of a humid space here. It's probably about 60 to 70% humid in this space, where I would say outside, it's probably 40 to maybe 50. Based on where you are in the Bay Area, that changes. All of our little microclimates change the humidity throughout. But for the most part, nothing that I have in the shop here would really thrive outside. They would really have a hard time.
I understand you have a different type of indoor plants for beginners, people who have pets, and people who wants to live in healthy living environments. Can you elaborate more on different type of plants?
So as far as plants for beginners, there's definitely a good range of plants that I could recommend for somebody. If they walked in here and they said, I don't know anything about plants, everything I've ever had, I've killed. I think that those types of people really need to take a step back and give themselves some access to forgive themselves, in the sense that no one is able to know everything. So for a beginner, I would recommend you start with something like a ZZ plant or a snake plant that I've got here behind me. These plants you only really need to water about once a month. If you wanted to go a little bit more fun and have some access to a lot of leaves, that would be the pothos family. These need watering about once a week or so, but I've also found that they are very adaptable. I've kind of heard that story from people. I went away for a week. My friend was supposed to take care of my plants, and all of my plants died except for my pothos. The pothos, they're pretty hardy. They come in a range of colors. You can kind of see that if you wanted to get something that's a little more exciting, the pothos family has a wide range of variegation. this is one of my favorites here. You can kind of see the silver aspects of these leaves. All of these I would recommend that a beginner could have in their life. You don't have to have something that's very, very basic and boring and your friends won't like it for you to really thrive as a beginner. I think that one thing that you have to consider is developing a relationship with this plant that would be on a kind of a daily scale, a weekly scale, a monthly scale, and then a yearly scale. There's aspects throughout that relationship that you have to take into account because the plants need you more than anything. If you don't care for these plants, they have really no way. They're not in their natural habitat, so they can't seek out water and nutrients the way that they would in the wild. So you have to be that steward for them. And I think when you develop that, you really kind of fill yourself up and you feel, when you get a brand new leaf growing, it's almost like a magical quality that you just feel so connected to a long, it's thousands, millions of years of development for this to happen. And you can be part of it. You came from the wild and you can return to the wild a little bit by bringing plants into your home. There are a wide range of plants. And if you have pets in your home, I would highly recommend you visit the ASPCA website. You talk to one of our Leafy experts here. We have a specific set of plants that are set aside for pet friendly. And one of those is the Calathea and the Maranta family. I've got one here. This is actually a non-toxic plant. Your pets could chew right on it and they would probably just feel a distaste in their mouth and probably get over it, but it's not going to cause them any harm. I've actually heard some people say that this plant can be a little bit of a hallucinogen for their cats, so they're drawn to it, but I wouldn't recommend to let them chew on the sansevierias and the snake plants because it's not good for them long term. There's a lot of chemical constituency within that can do some damage to your pet's internal organs and things like that. So you want to be mindful of that when you're shopping. That being said, I have 2 cats. I had a little dog in my life. And what I've done is, because I have 70 plus plants, definitely I have some toxic plants in my collection. I reward good behaviors and I keep things up high. Either I put it up on a bookshelf and let it drape down, or I have a specific place where I have a lot of these plants. I don't put many on the ground that they're going to be, they're going to feel compelled to chew on. Most of the plants that I have on the lower space, they have big leaves that don't really interest them. They don't move around much. And I just try to, give them pets and give them treats away from those plants just to kind of help foster an environment where they don't even want to chew on that kind of stuff. As far as cleaning the air, the science behind it is pretty remarkable. NASA has done some research. They were more concerned about could they actually sustain atmospheric environments on the International Space Station. In the early 80s, they did some tests, and they found that when they put these plants specific species into these clear boxes, then pump them full of chemicals, within an 8-hour, a week, and a month period, there were a lot of these free radical chemicals that are kind of just free floating in the air that were pulled into the parts of the plant. The interesting thing is they do a little bit of every piece of the plant does something. So the blades, the canes, the leaves, the roots, they all sequester contaminants in them and they release oxygen. So all plants are constantly working through that process of pulling CO2 and other things into them and then releasing oxygen. And that can be beneficial for you. So there's a nice relationship that you can build. Now, I want to be clear. You're not going to be able to replace your expensive HEPA filters. If you have allergies, things like that, you need to take that into consideration. I have definitely had some clients that I've sold the rubber tree plants, the Ficus elasticas to, and they actually have an allergic reaction to the sap, which is the natural form of latex. So take that into consideration. If you see rashes, if you feel weepy eyes, things like that, plants come from the wild. And so they do have some of those aspects just part of their evolution, and you can't evade that stuff. So you need to be realistic when bringing plants into your home.
So you mentioned those plants for beginners, you only need to water once a month. Are they considered of a drought tolerance plant?
Yeah, I whenever I think about drought tolerance, I think about the outdoor space. But yes, when you're indoors, there are a few species: the snake plants, the succulents, the cactus, the ZZ plants. There are a few others that are escaping me right now, but those are about a once a month water. And if you ask our team here, they will definitely help you fill in that. But the amazing thing is in the era that we live in, there is an abundance of information on the internet that you can take a photo of a plant and have AI tell you what that plant is, where it comes from, what its needs are. There are communities online that will hone into very specific plants. Um, there are a full range of ways that you can be connected into this and learn a lot as a beginner. And even as I feel a lot of people consider me a pro, but I still feel like I'm constantly learning about plants. There's always something that you can kind of bring into your collection and just find a whole new vein of things that you can drill down into and just become like enamored with all of the information that's in the world. But uh, drought tolerance is a concern that we have here, obviously. Um, you can definitely consider other ways to water. You could, like, if you cooked pasta and you had water left over from that pasta, you could save it in a very specific area and let it cool down and then use that to water your plants if you were considering drought issues. You don't necessarily have to always go to that tap water. The one thing I will say is when you have some specific species that are a little more fragile, like the Calathea family there behind me, they come from the rainforest and they really actually need distilled or purified water. Worst case scenario, if you don't have a purification system or you don't have the ability to constantly have a budget for distilled water, you can decanter some tap water out of the sink, let it sit for 24 hours, and that'll off gas some of those things that are in our water system that we have to do as humans to clean our water, but they don't really react well with the plants. Calciums, salts, things like that that are in our water system that can really like bother a plant. So you need to be cognizant of that when you're bringing plants into your home.
And I heard, I'm not sure how true that is, the grease from the food actually not good for the plants. So you shouldn't water your plants in the kitchen sink.
Uh, the grease can cause some problems. There's like fatty acids, proteins, and things like that that they don't really respond well to. The kitchen sink, some plants like the pothos family here, I feel like you could literally take this plant out into the front yard and water it with your watering hose, and it would survive and thrive and be happy. This plant comes from Mexico. She wants to climb a jungle tree. She's very hardy. The Calathea family and like this Maranta here, if you were to do that same thing to this, you'd probably get crispy edges and the plant would just overall start having some issues, maybe yellowing leaves and fall apart in a matter of weeks. So that's the sort of range that you have to consider when you're bringing plants into your life. We've got a lot of rare plants and the price point on this plant is $600. And the
Wow.
reason why is because it's very specific to its variegation, and this is highly sought after. This market is kind of changing by the minute, by the hour, but right now these are very, very expensive plants that you would definitely want to consider using distilled or purified water. There's RO water, there's hydrogenated water. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can buy into this whole process. I don't recommend this for anyone that's not prepared to get into a $600 plant though. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. I love it myself, but you have to be very realistic. The difference between this and a $24.95 plant is a pretty big pretty big leap. So be prepared for that kind of stuff.
Most plants behind you, they are very green. Do you have any colored indoor plants?
So there's typically a spectrum in the plant world from green, as you can see, I keep showing this one. This is a pothos enjoy, and this has some variegation to the leaves. So there's some white that kind of breaks it up, gives it kind of cottage feel to it. Whereas this is a much lighter green in the Philodendron cordatum neon. So this is a bright green. Now, if you go over into the caladium family, you can actually get some pink, maybe even some purple. This one is, I don't know what the very specific family name is, but as you can see, it's got some very beautiful pink leaves. And I like to also look at the leaves through the sunlight, because that kind of adds like almost like a stained glass window. You get a lot more color and spectrum. One of my favorite families is the Tradescantia. And this is actually one of the little pink panther. And this one, you can kind of see there's a brilliance to these. They store a fine line of air bubbles within their leaves, and that gives them kind of a silver brilliance or an opalescence. And this is a very, very tiny diminutive version, whereas this one is the Tradescantia zebrina that you probably have seen in various different homes and gardens. And you can kind of see the underside of these leaves have a bright, beautiful purple to them. Now that range kind of develops in the wild based on access to light. And as I've sort of understood, the darker the leaf, the more burgundy or purple the leaf, they typically were in a lower light setting. So you want to consider that when bringing these colorful plants into your life. I wouldn't ever really let them sit in hot, bright sun. Here in the shop, we've only really got 2 big plate glass windows in the front of the shop, and we only really get direct sun late in the day, and it's only for a short period of time. So a lot of the plants that need that full sun are at the front of the shop. They also tend to be bigger. For a little more color, I'll also show this one here. This is in the Ficus elastica family, and this is one of 3 varieties. This is the ruby, and you can kind of see that it does have a very pink leaf to it. There's 2 more varieties of this. One is Taniki, and that has more of a cream color to it. And then there's the burgundy, which is a much darker green leaf. This is one of my favorite families. This is the croton, and this is just a burst of color. Now, this is a very large plant, so I would consider this would be something on a floor. Maybe it's in a pot with a stand. I wouldn't put this on a tabletop necessarily, unless you had a large table that could fit maybe 30 people.
Okay, now you bring to the questions, how hard to carry an indoor plant? Can you tell us about pots, soil, light, and water?
So there's 3 things that you always want to consider when bringing a plant into your life. The sunlight is one aspect, the water is the second aspect, and then the nutrients is that third. So there's kind of a triangle that you want to find a good center space in between. Typically when somebody comes in here and they don't have photos of their space, I'll say to them, is your space that you want to put this plant in, can you turn all of the electric lights off and read a book in that space? That to me says that you have bright indirect light. It's the words on the page should be still legible, and you shouldn't be squinting to see what's on there. That typically is enough light for most plants to be okay, unless they really specifically, like that Ficus elastica that I showed you, they really need 6 to 8 hours of good bright sun. So I would get them closer to a window space. But even here, you can see in the time that we've been on camera, the light has definitely changed. The sun is always moving. So you've got to take that into consideration too. I like to recommend that if you have the time, kind of just on a Saturday, just the place that you want to put a plant, just stay there, take some photos, maybe get a cup of coffee, watch your shows, read a book, and just kind of observe through the day where that sunlight changes and that ball of light throughout your whole space changes. The other thing I did want to tell you about nutrients, I like to recommend to go organic as possible. These are all going to be in your indoor space. You don't want anything that's really toxic to you or your family, even in your nutrients. There's kind of a couple of different ways to derive nutrients from the processes that are in the world. One is petroleum and one is organic. And I recommend more organic. This product here that we have is actually made from natural seaweed. It's 1 drop to about a cup of water. I have 70 plus plants in my home. So for me, I take for 1 gallon of water, it takes about 16 of these drops a week. And this is a very light nutrient. There are some other products on the market that you could get that you just really need to read the instructions. There's dry and there's liquid. And I like to go with liquid because it's a little bit easier to get it throughout the whole plant and not have a lot of burning. You want to be considerate. Too much is not always a good thing. I always like to go a little bit slow and low with my nutrient and just develop it over time. You can water with a nutrient once every 2 weeks, depending on what you have. Maybe they're constantly in a growth cycle in the early spring, so you do want to give them those nutrients more frequently. But then when you get to winter, all plants kind of slow down taking in nutrients, and if you kept pumping that into the soil, they'll just kind of sit there and develop way too much. So pull back on your watering and your nutrients in the winter is what I would recommend, by at least 30%. So if I'm doing a full gallon of water all the rest of the year, I'll maybe pull it down to like a third of that, or pull a third of that away when I go to water. Sunlight's a big one. The humidity in your space can also be a factor. If you're seeing crispy brown edges, that to me shows that you don't have enough humidity in your space, especially when it comes to these more tender plants. Always be considerate that if you have like the calatheums or the calathea and the alocasias, the caladiums, they need 60 to 80% humidity. So a humidifier can really do wonders for you.
Do you carry any orchids or edible plants?
I don't have edibles. Every once in a while during the spring, we bring in some herb garden, little countertop herbs and things like that. But for the most part, I don't have any vegetables. We typically in the shop don't get many flowers. Sometimes here and there, we bring in some interesting aspects of flowers. I did see one earlier, but I don't want to run away. We don't always have orchids, but every once in a while, we might have something. I would definitely either shoot us an email on our website at info@theleafyplant.com, or just give us a call at the shop that's closest to you. I'm here at the Palo Alto shop. We've also got Roseville. We're opening a new one in Valley Fair. And then we also have one in Pasadena with more to come. We're always looking to expand. So we might be coming to your neighborhood by the time you see this.
You mentioned earlier about brown tips on the leaves. What are the warning signs that plants need to have special attentions?
So plants only have so many ways to communicate. One is yellowing leaves, one is brown tips, one is kind of a overall wilting. The yellowing leaves isn't always what you read on the internet. You have to consider what's been happening to that plant in the space. So yellowing leaves can mean too much sunlight. Yellowing leaves can also mean too much water. The number one issue that I hear here in the shop is root rot. And root rot is just letting a plant sit in its own water. I typically recommend that you leave plants in their nursery pot. And when I say a nursery pot, I'm talking about these kind of gross plastic pots. The nice thing, two different aspects. One, if you buy this pot in May and you like it and it fits your decor, you can live with it and be happy. And then come September, if you want to change things out, it's much easier to just take this and swap it out for another pot really quick. And a lot of people consider this cheating. I don't. I think that whatever helps you and your plant have a great relationship and not constantly be worrying. That being said, some people just love to have plants potted directly in a pot. Now, this is a great example. There's no drainage hole in the bottom of this pot. And this would be an instant problem for root rot, especially with like a ZZ that you're only watering once a month. There's no real way, if you were to pot this plant directly in here, for you to see what's going on in that root system. So just be very aware of that. The one thing to avoid that I would recommend is getting a pot that has a drainage hole in the bottom and possibly a drainage dish. The nice thing about the drainage dish is even if you were to pot directly into here, you would be able to visually see whether or not the water's coming out the bottom. You always kind of want the water to flow through and dry out every week. You can go a little bit more scientific and get one of our water moisture meters and dip it into the soil, and it will tell you specifically if it's dry, moist, or wet. And then you'll know when I go to water, if I'm dipping that moisture meter in there and it's saying wet, I'm going to hold off. And then I need to consider that each week when I go to water. If that plant is staying wetter longer, maybe it's not evaporating in the sun. Maybe it's pulled back from a space that it's not allowing that water to get through the plant quick. So you might want to pull back a little bit on your water. The other aspect, I would say, we talked about the humidifier. You can also bring a mister in. Now, these are really great because they're called continuous misters. And you kind of pull once and it just constantly puts out a really fine mist. What I would recommend is if you're going to mist plants, don't let the plant sit in a hot sun space with water droplets on it. The other thing is if you mist underneath the leaves, they have a little bit more time to absorb them throughout the whole plant, and it won't just become kind of soggy and prone to bacteria and things like that. So be aware of that if you are going to mist your plants.
So what surfaces are good for plants placement? For example, countertop or floors?
So the good news is there's no wrong answer. You really have to consider, how does it make you feel? What do you feel in your heart about a plant? When it comes to tabletop plants, I would recommend smaller plants just because you want to consider eye lines. If you're talking to a guest and the plant's up here in front, it's not going to be fun and comfortable. And your guests are probably going to be like, what's with this plant? Can I move somewhere else? If you do want larger plants in your space, you want to consider the architectural build of like how tall they can get. I have, this plant here comes to about my mid-waist or so, and this would be great for a floor space. I also know with this plant itself, I've got maybe some examples at the front of the shop here. This plant can get taller than me in, a matter of 6 months or so. So you want to consider how much taller a plant will get. I wouldn't ever really, for a tabletop or a countertop, I wouldn't really go much beyond, this is about an 8-inch scale, maybe a 10-inch pot, an 8-inch plant. But this also doesn't have a lot of height to it. It's going to constantly crawl out. You want to maybe be cognizant of that. If you have like a big centerpiece on a big table, if it has like 10 plus chairs or so, there would probably still be enough room to have place settings and this plant here in the center, even if it trailed out. I wouldn't really go, think about that. When you come into the shop, what I would highly recommend is take some photos of your space in optimal light. So if it's in the middle of the day, don't take them at night. It's really not going to help you or I if I'm seeing photos of your house at night. Early morning is good, but that midday is kind of the hardest part of the day when that hot sun comes through. So I would be able to tell you like, well, that window looks really hot. It's maybe south facing and it just gets a lot of exposure. So be careful there. There's only a certain range of plants like the monsteras that I would recommend for a high bright space like that. I've even had one client came in and it was a very impressive thing. She used the sort of Google 360 virtual tour to document her space, and she walked me through it on her phone. So if you're able to kind of have that the pre-planning to have something as dynamic as a 3D video or even just a video from your phone, that will kind of help the person here at the shop give you some ideas of what you could put in that space. Photos work too. What I always recommend with taking photos of your space is don't take a photo of the wall that doesn't get sun. Put your back against that wall and take a photo showing me what sort of sunlight you get throughout the whole room. You really don't want to document the corners unless you want to put a plant there. Maybe take a photo of that dark corner, but then also take a photo of the opposite corner where I can see what sort of sunlight gets to that corner. A lot of it is trial and error. And as much as I can tell you here in the shop, sight unseen, without actually being on site with your place, every single plant and every different space is a case by case. So you have to really consider if a plant isn't doing well in a space, either look up online and say, what does this plant need? And they might tell you you need to get it more sun, less sun, more water, less water, more humidity, things like that. There are ways to kind of do some course correcting. I want to tell all of your entire group of people watching this, have patience with yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you don't do it the first time. I found that failure is an amazing teacher. And if you really want to plant in your life, you can learn how to keep it happy and healthy. There are ways. Have confidence in yourself. No one is born with all the information in the world. So you do have to take steps and learn. But I find if you start with some of these, the pothos, the snake plants, the ZZ plants, even the monsteras, I've found are great teachers to help you kind of get incremental steps to feel a little bit better about yourself. I don't really believe in the green thumb. I think that that's kind of a misnomer that we've let ourselves believe that I'm not part of this exclusive group, but I'm here to tell you that anybody can have plants in their life. It's something that you have to develop a relationship and get that muscle memory of understanding, but you can do it. Anybody can do it. The placement of plants is really up to you. There's no right or wrong way unless you feel that it's right or wrong. You know, if it's interrupting your flow, if you can't just spread your arm the way that you want to, maybe consider putting into the corners of your space. If you do want to have something specifically in the center of your tabletop, just consider, you know, all the daily traffic. If you have kids in your life, if you have pets, things like that. I always try to say people first, plants second. And you can definitely bring a lot of beauty and the full range of the jungle into your life and still be able to like live your truest self.
Tell us, where do people can buy your plants? What is the best way to buy it, online or in the store?
We have gone through several different iterations. Our website, we used to do during, you know, the high end days of the lockdown, we did a lot of no contact deliveries, but we've pulled back on that because it's really hard to keep a plant very healthy through the delivery system. I would highly recommend you give us a call to your local shop, whether you're in Palo Alto, Roseville, San Jose, Pasadena. We're open Monday through Sunday, 11 to 7:30. Our Valley Fair space has very specific hours that are tuned to the mall. So I'm not certain what they are right now, but I think that they're 11 to 7:30 Monday through Saturday. And I don't know what their Sunday hours are, but they're going to be in the center of the mall. So you're going to definitely see them. We have a weekly plant shipment. So we're constantly changing in inventory. The one thing I would highly recommend is if you walk into my space and you see a plant and you're in love with it, buy it that day because it will not be there by the next time you come. These plants move really fast. We have a lot of really dedicated regulars that are always coming through here and trying to add to their population, whether it's a $600 rare plant or a $10.95 pothos. There's a full range of anybody can get something here. There's a lot of gifts. We do gift wrapping. We have a nice little bag that has a fan club of all of its own. It's a really nice little piece, and we can add a ribbon to it, give you a card. We have gift cards online. I've had people who live in New York, but their friends and family are here in the Bay Area, and they'll call us. They'll buy a gift card over online, and then that person has, you know, carte blanche to just come in and fulfill their plant dreams. But really, being in our spaces is the best way to get access to us.
It's wonderful for all the valuable information you provided to us today, and I will be sure to visit your Palo Alto store.
Thank you, Daphne. This is great. We really appreciate you having us on.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.